We see that disease is actually on the good side of things. It's an effort of nature to free the system. Right? To free the system from what? From conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. And then we go on to say that in the case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained. So it's a violation of laws of health that brings on conditions, and disease is there in order to free the system from those conditions. And when somebody is sick, we need to look for the cause. That's the simple thing. We need to look for the cause. And yes, our sinful nature is the foundation of disease when we find it in each individual, but we recognize that children inherit their sinful nature, which they're not responsible for, but they have it. And the child's sinful nature causes the child to bind to mother through a kind of a spiritual umbilical cord. Yes, you have a physical one, but there's a spiritual connection between mother and child. And the child will eventually develop a connection with others as well, including father and, so on. But primary connection is with mother. So the child was created for a source that is good. And if its source is not good, then the child is going to manifest distress through either its behavior or illness. If you are thinking negative thoughts and those are running through your head all the time, then, like we talked about in our session, overcoming negative thoughts, you want to take those negative thoughts and you want to replace them with the truth of God's Word. If you are eating your hamburgers, well, there's better things for you to eat. And if you are drinking alcohol and other things like that, well, God created you for water, not for the alcohol and so on. And then we read that nature is to be assisted in her effort to expel impurities and to re-establish right conditions in the system. And so if the mother and others can learn and apply the truths of this series that we've been talking together in their own lives, and if they accept that they are a child of God, that they can take from God as their source and they can serve as the channel of God's love to others, including the child, and be able to love because they have God's love, then the child will heal and its behavior will change. And you see that, right? You see that happening. You see the child behaving, the behavior changes when mom gets a hold of God, right? Friends, welcome to another episode of Truth for Life. We are on a journey together towards health and freedom. And today we are going to be looking at the topic of health by faith. We're told disease is an effort of nature to free the system from conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. All right, so I'm going to stop right there. And we see that disease is actually on the good side of things. It's an effort of nature to free the system. Right? To free the system from what? From conditions that result from a violation of the laws of health. And then we go on to say that in the case of sickness, the cause should be ascertained. So it's a violation of laws of health that brings on conditions, and disease is there in order to free the system from those conditions. And when somebody is sick, we need to look for the cause. That's the simple thing. We need to look for the cause. And when we think of the cause, we need to consider that sickness of the mind prevails everywhere. 9/10 of the diseases from which men suffer have their foundation here. So, when we're looking for the cause, we need to aim for the mind. And if 9 times out of 10 you're going to find the cause in the mind, then it makes sense to aim at the mind. Okay? Now, as we looked at before, we see that the mind is a combination of the spirit and the brain, the central nervous system, and that the mind is created to feed on truth. It's created to feed on truth. And when truth is the information that the mind is feeding on, then through the nervous system, the mind can control the functions of the body the way that it's supposed to, and things work well. But if it is lies or error that the mind is feeding on, then through the spirit, through the brain, through the nervous system, that will result in dysfunction in the body somehow and somewhere. Now, no one else's mind can create disease in your body. It's only your mind that can create your disease in your body. Now, I'm not saying only the mind can create disease. We looked before, a number of sessions ago, at the 5 different causes of dysfunction. But when it is the mind that is causing that dysfunction, it's not somebody else's mind, it's your mind. And whatever someone else thinks, that can only affect their own health, not yours, unless you take their thoughts and you make their thoughts your thoughts. Right? So you cannot blame others for your disease. As we're learning how the mind can impact the body, now sometimes individuals will start blaming others because others have been this way, thought this way, and so on, and now they find themselves sick. No, it's not because of others, it's because of your own mind, right? You never create, but mind you, you never create your disease on purpose. Right? Nobody does. Nobody does. It is not on purpose. It is not conscious. It's not something that somebody does to themselves with any consciousness or on purpose. You don't do it because you want to. You don't do it consciously. You do it because you can't help it. Right? You do it because you can't help it. And you do it because of the sinful nature that you were born with. And you don't have a responsibility for that sinful nature that you were born with. But nobody else can do it to you. Only you can do it to yourself. Now, also, as we talked about in the 5 different causes of dysfunction, there is the enemy. And when he has permission, like in the case of Job, well, then he can be involved in this whole process as well. So why does disease end up affecting certain organs or certain systems or different parts of the body? And it's a good question, and I would say that the answer is not completely clear, at least in my mind yet. But I know that, or the analogy that helps me is that the brain is like the piano, the spirit is like the piano player, and your thoughts are the music that comes from it. If you're going to have any music, you must have the piano, and you must have the piano player, and it is possible that the spirit, through the nervous system, determines where the signals are going to end up in the body, and therefore where the manifestation comes. So again, you have your brain, and here's you have your spirit that can play. Instead of having 88 keys like on a piano, well, now you have a few, tens of billions of neurons that you can interact with. And those signals are going to be sent to various different parts of the body, depending upon where the signal begins in the cortex of the brain, and the connections that are between the brain and then the different parts of the body. We're told that the brain is the capital of the body, the seat of all the nervous forces and of mental action. The nerves proceeding from the brain, control the body. By the brain nerves, mental impressions are conveyed to all the nerves of the body as by telegraph wires. Of course, this was written long ago, and that's how you communicated back then. And they control the vital action of every part of the system. All the organs of motion are governed by the communications they receive from the brain. So, why do some conditions or problems affect one side of the body and not the other? Or why do some of them begin on one side of the body? Well, if it begins on the dominant side, which for most people ends up being the right side of the body, but remember, the fibers and everything from the brain, the axons and the communication channels, they cross. You have two separate brains, essentially, a right brain and a left brain, and those fibers are going to go down to the center part of the brain, and then they'll end up crossing and then going down to the body through the spinal cord and so on. And so, if it's right body, then it's going to be left head. And if it's left body, then it's going to be right head. So if it begins, whatever disease or condition, if it begins on the right side of the dominant side of the body, then that would be, for most people, right body, left head. Then my observation and the observation of a number of other clinicians is you look for the most dominant relationship issues for the individual, and that would be with mother or spouse or lovers. So you're going to find oftentimes mother, spouse, lover issues that will manifest on the dominant side, coming from the dominant hemisphere of the brain. And if it begins on the non-dominant side, usually the left body and the right brain, if it begins on that side, then you look for issues in relationships with father and others, like siblings, children, and so on. Again, this is just an observation. That's all it is. And yet, I found the observation to be quite strong. Just the other day, I was talking with an individual, and they were discussing about the skin cancer that a relative of theirs had developed and eventually passed away from, and it developed in an armpit. And we were discussing the fact that this type of skin cancer, melanoma, most of the time develops in a place that is not sun exposed or is not significantly sun exposed. And yet its sun exposure is touted as one of the risk factors associated with it. But again, most of the time it begins in a non-sun exposed area, and this individual, it began in an armpit. And that's quite not sun exposed. And anyways, they talked about this, and then they talked about the stressors that were on in the life of their loved one before they developed this cancer, and it happened to be issues associated with a sibling. And I said, well, then that means that their cancer began on the left armpit. And they were like, how did you know? How did you know? Well, from observation. It's from observation. And you can take it or leave it. It's not a big deal. But it's just somewhere to look and to go, okay, well, that's interesting. Maybe we could look in that area. Now, disease is often associated with certain types of problems in the life of the individual. One of the major problems associated with disease is loss. And I find that frequently, if I'm dealing with an individual that has cancer, oftentimes there is some significant loss that has happened in their life. Bitterness is another major issue that individuals struggle with. It's associated with disease, and there's a wide variety. And I'm not saying that somebody that has cancer only has loss. I'm just saying that my observation is that often there is loss associated with it. Bitterness, all sorts of things, and I find frequently autoimmune disease associated with bitterness. You can have individuals that have disease associated with guilt or with conflict, or where there are attempts to control, but they fail at doing so, and so they find themselves at loss of control. But that's not all. But in looking for the cause of disease, it's important to address these types of issues. If we're simply dealing with the medications or the chemicals or other things like that, yet 9/10 of the time the disease has its foundation in the mind, well, we need to have that in mind, and we need to address those particular issues when we are looking at healing and health. We're told that the relationship that exists between the mind and the body is very intimate. When one is affected, the other sympathizes. The condition of the mind affects the health to a far greater degree than many realize. Many of the diseases from which men suffer are the result of mental depression, grief, anxiety, discontent, remorse, guilt, distrust. All tend to break down the life forces and to invite decay and death. Disease is sometimes produced and is often greatly aggravated by the imagination. Many are lifelong invalids who might be well if they only thought so. Many imagine that every slight exposure will cause illness, and the evil effect is produced because it is expected. Many die from disease, the cause of which is wholly imaginary. Courage, hope, faith, sympathy, love promote health and prolong life. A contented mind, a cheerful spirit, is health to the body and strength to the soul. A merry or a rejoicing heart doeth good like a medicine. In the treatment of the sick, the effect of mental influence should not be overlooked. Rightly used, this influence affords one of the most effective agencies for combating disease. So, as we are dealing with the mind, we need to deal with these various different issues. Now here you have a picture of the bones and the bone marrow and the various different types of blood cells that are produced in the bone marrow. What is it that comes from the bone marrow? Well, it's going to be your blood cells. It'll be your red blood cells, your white blood cells, and your platelets. And those white blood cells are the main factors of your immune system. Right? These are the cellular factors of your immune system. And so if somebody has an autoimmune disease and they have an autoimmune attack on the body, well, those white blood cells that are either going to be producing the antibodies or going to be part of the cellular function in the destruction of cells in the body, those are going to be coming from the bone marrow. And the bone marrow, well, the bones have lots of nerves in them. If you ever want to know whether a bone has nerves in it, just break one. You'll find it's quite painful. And I have broken quite a few bones in my lifetime, and it has never been a pleasant experience. And so you have lots of nerves in the bones, and when you are involved in medicine, especially in like intensive care, where you draw levels of blood on individuals multiple times a day because they're in a critical condition and you need to know what's going on in their body in order to respond to it. Well, you notice that blood levels of all sorts of things are always changing all the time throughout the day. So red blood cells are up a little bit, they're down a little bit. Platelets are up a bit and down a bit. The white blood cells, the different types of them, your neutrophils are up and your lymphocytes are down, and then lymphocytes start going up and neutrophils down, and your eosinophils and so on. There's all different types of white blood cells, and they're always going up and down. What is it that regulates those levels of those different blood cells and their production and then their function? Well, it's going to be the nervous system. It will be through the mind. And its impact through the bones and the bone marrow, and now its impact on the development of those white blood cells. So if you have an individual that has autoimmune disease, well, then you've got an issue that's happening through the nervous system, through the aspect of the bones, and then affecting the white blood cells in the system for that individual. And I would propose to you that the Bible knew that, that God knew that in the Bible, and that He put into the Bible things that we can understand in regards to the cause of blood disorders, of autoimmune disease, and bone marrow issues. So for diseases of the bone marrow, including autoimmune disease and blood cancers and so on, look in the Bible for passages that refer to bone, bones, or marrow. And particularly, I would say, pay attention to Psalms, Proverbs, and Isaiah. That's where I found it to be most productive in looking at that. And if those passages talk about weak bones, or dry bones, or broken bones, or dry marrow, then look in the verses around that reference to bone, bones, or marrow, and you will find the cause of the problem. And if it talks about strong bones or fat marrow or bones that are together, then look in the verses around there and you will find the solution to the problem. It's right there in the Bible. It's a medical textbook for us. So if you're looking at the problem, why might I have the problem? Well, some good places to look would be Psalms chapter 6, 31, 38, 102, and 109. And Proverbs 12, 14, and 17. And if you're looking at the solution, I would suggest Psalm 34, Psalm 51, and Proverbs 3, 15 through 17, and Isaiah 58. These are good places for you to look to find not only the cause, but also the solution. And to summarize what I have found in those particular locations, biblical causes of immune dysfunction include abandonment, betrayal, cursing, depression, discontent, disloyalty, disrespect, envy, fear, grief, guilt, in trouble and out of control, loneliness, taking things personally, murder, persecution, rejection, reproach, shame, slander, and unmerciful and a broken spirit. Now, are all of these causes an external cause, or is it an internal cause? Well, the Bible refers to it in terms of an internal cause. And all of these are internal things, and they have to do with my mind and how I perceive things around me, as we've been talking about in this whole series. Now, what about solutions, biblical solutions to immune dysfunction? Well, that includes a clean or a merry heart, a right or a contrite spirit, a good report, which the gospel is a good report, acceptance by God, accepting others, contentment in God, departing from evil, distrusting self, encouraging others, fearing and respecting God, forgiveness, gladness, God's sustaining spirit, helping others to be free, joy, keeping God's law from the heart, knowing God is near, knowing He hears you, knowing He answers you, knowing He delivers you, knowing He will save you, mercy, peace, pleasant words, so both received by God and pleasant words spoken to others, righteousness, salvation, seeking out and helping those in need, sharing what you have freely with others, surrender, trusting in God, and truth. And are those an internal cure or an external cure? Well, clearly they're an internal cure. And so the Bible deals with autoimmune conditions and bone marrow issues in terms of an internal issue, not an external issue. And an internal cause, not an external cause, and therefore an internal solution, not an external one. Now, what about childhood illnesses? We have children that get sick as well, and we've been talking about, this truth for life, the fundamental law, how individuals think, our sinful nature, how it impacts these various different things. And yes, our sinful nature is the foundation of disease when we find it in each individual. But we recognize that children inherit their sinful nature, which they're not responsible for, but they have it. And the child's sinful nature causes the child to bind to mother through a kind of a spiritual umbilical cord. Yes, you have a physical one, but there's a spiritual connection between mother and child. And the child will eventually develop a connection with others as well, including father and, so on. But primary connection is with mother. So the child was created for a source that is good. And if its source is not good, then the child is going to manifest distress through either its behavior or illness. It's going to manifest that distress through either behavior or illness. And if you have a child that is uncontrollable, well, that's going to be manifesting in behavior. And oftentimes the uncontrollable child is not so sick, but it's the one that's controlled outside behaviorally that tends to be the one that gets ill. Okay? Because now it's manifesting from a disease standpoint. So if a child is ill, after evaluating for the 5 causes of dysfunction and determining that the cause is likely in the mind, then my first question when a little one is ill is, what's going on with mother? That's my first question. What's going on with mother? Because she's the primary source for the child. And if she, as the source, is not good and the child was made for good, now mom's not good, mom is not good because she wants to be. She's not good because she has the sinful fallen human nature. She's not trying to be that way, she just can't help it, as we've been talking about in this series. So there's no blame for mother at all. No, not at all. But the child itself has its own problem, and that is that it takes mother as its source rather than taking God as its source, which it would in a perfect condition. In a perfect state, the child would have their Heavenly Father as the source rather than the mother as the source. But the child's own problem causes it to take from mother, and mother's own problem causes mother to not be exactly what the child needs, and now the child is in distress. Right? So, again, my first question is, what's going on with mother? And my first question for mother, if I'm speaking to her, is, how is your relationship with your husband? Because often there is some kind of disagreement, there is some kind of conflict that's going on in the relationship between father and mother. She cannot respect him, she cannot love him for some reason. And if mother is in conflict with her husband, if she is at loss, if she is bitter, if she is struggling with guilt and so on, then the child is going to react to mother's condition through that spiritual connection that the child has with the mother, even if the mother tries to hide it from the child. Even if the mother is not actively, displaying it around the child when she's with the child, there's still that spiritual connection, and the child will be affected by that. So if this is the case, then I don't deal with the child, I deal with the mother. And the significant relationships in the family, because with the little ones, I can't reason with them, I can't teach them what they need to know. I can do that with the adults. And so if the mother and others can learn and apply the truths of this series that we've been talking together in their own lives, and if they accept that they are a child of God, that they can take from God as their source and they can serve as the channel of God's love to others, including the child, and be able to love because they have God's love, then the child will heal and its behavior will change. And you see that, right? You see that happening. You see the child behaving, the behavior changes when mom gets a hold of God, right? And you can see the diseases oftentimes going away as well when mother gets things figured out from this standpoint. Now, when it comes to mental illness, this can be a difficult one for us to think about and to deal with. Now, remember, the mind has 2 components. It has the brain and it has the spirit. And the brain is physical. It's made up of, it is spiritual. And the spirit controls which chemicals are produced by the brain and how much of the chemicals are produced. Because it's the spirit that's the piano player. It's the one that's directing the functions of the physical brain. And a problem of the spirit can change the chemicals that are produced in the brain and can change the chemical levels that are in the brain, or the chemical, the percentages and how much production or not production and so on. And a problem of the spirit can also lead to disease of the brain or inflammation of the brain. So if you have disease developing, for example, in the pancreas or in the liver or on the skin or other places like that, well, that doesn't necessarily affect the ability to think, but when disease affects the brain itself, and the brain is part of what is needed in the thinking process, well, now it gets a bit challenging. Because if the brain is inflamed or diseased, then if the brain doesn't have the proper fuel So there's deficiency or a toxicity or a poison. And if there is physical trauma to the brain, then the mind cannot function properly because it needs the physical structure of the brain to be correct in order for it to function well. And the thoughts can therefore be deranged, and this can result in delusions, it can result in hallucinations, and other manifestations of what we call mental illness. Okay. And so you can have mental illness that begins by either primarily disrupting the physical structure of the brain, which includes chemicals, or you can do so by a problem of the spirit that then changes the physical structure or the chemistry of the brain, and then you can, or disease in the brain, and then you can have mental health challenges in relation to that. We're also told that unhealthful conditions should be changed. So if we have disease and there's sickness, then unhealthful conditions should be changed. So what do? Well, I use natural remedies, and I change my lifestyle, and I do things of this nature, and that is appropriate. And it's appropriate to participate in wellness behaviors. So drinking your water, getting your exercise, living temperately. And temperance is avoiding what's evil and using wisely what's good. Love, that we've been talking a lot about during this series. Nutrition, right? Eating a proper diet. Environment, which includes sunshine. It includes your thought life. It includes the air that you breathe, pure air. It includes being around in nature that God created. It includes how you dress. And then sufficient rest and simple trust in God. These are wellness principles, standing for wellness. And so, yes, it's good for us to participate in these things, to be involved in these things. Yes, that's good. Now, sometimes we think, okay, well, I'll have patients and they'll have absorption issues, or they'll have, certain electrolytes that are off, or certain other minerals or vitamins that are not where they're supposed to be in the body, and so oftentimes we think of that as purely a physical thing. Yes, you can have derangements in vitamins and minerals and other different chemicals in the body if you're taking in too many, or if you're not taking in enough of the things that you need. That can clearly happen. But the absorption of chemicals through the digestive tract, through the respiratory tract, or through the skin, right? The digestion of those chemicals is regulated, right? And it can be regulated. Now, there's some amount of it that's going to be, just governed simply by law and the function of the chemicals that are there and the cell membrane and so on. But there is a regulation of that. We know that you can upregulate and downregulate cholesterol absorption and cholesterol production. We know that you can upregulate and downregulate the production and absorption and excretion of sodium and potassium and other electrolytes and so on. And so it's true for really the chemicals in the body. And the production of chemicals by the cells is clearly regulated. And it's clearly regulated. And it's the mind that is the master controller of the various different chemical levels in the body. And if someone has adequate consumption of nutrients, so they're getting in, they have access to, and they are consuming sufficient amount of nutrients, but they still have a chemical imbalance, then I say, look to the mind as the cause of the imbalance, because it's the controller of the absorption of those nutrients and the production of those nutrients if it's something that's produced in the body. So that's something else to look at. We're told also that wrong habits should be corrected. Wrong habits should be corrected. What wrong habits? Well, if you're not drinking for the weather, not drinking, dressing for the weather, then you should dress appropriately for the weather and the situations that you're in. If you are thinking negative thoughts and those are running through your head all the time, then like we talked about in our session, overcoming negative thoughts, you want to take those negative thoughts and you want to replace them with the truth of God's Word. If you are eating your hamburgers, well, there's better things for you to eat. And if you are drinking alcohol and other things like that, well, God created you for water, not for the alcohol and so on. And then we read, then nature is to be assisted in her effort to expel impurities and to re-establish right conditions in the system. So, what is it that expels impurities? Well, first of all, you have organs and systems that are involved in detoxifying and taking metabolic byproducts and breaking them down and getting rid of them. Your liver is a major detoxifier, right? And your kidneys as well. Your lungs also are important and involved in that process, and your skin is an important component of that as well. And so what is it that helps in those situations? Well, oftentimes the solution to pollution is dilution. So drinking lots of water is going to be helpful. Sweating, exercising and breathing more, getting more out through the sweat, drinking more water and then being able to flush more things out through the urine, making sure that you have good passage of food and everything through the digestive tract and everything like that. So this can involve the use of hydrotherapy, so using water in order to affect the body temperature and the blood flow to different parts of the body. That can be helpful. There are certain herbs that are helpful in helping with liver function and kidney function and so on. Mind you, the herbs don't have any virtue in and of themselves. It's the power of God that is working in the herbs, right? Not continuing to toxify yourself, and so changing what you bring in, drinking lots of water and exercising, all of these are ways that help in that process. We're also admonished that if anyone is sick, we should do something, and that's anointing. Now, this doesn't mean if you have a runny nose or if you've got a scratch in your throat or something like that, but this means that if you've got an illness, you have a disease or something like that, is anyone among you sick? Let him call for the elders of the church and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord, and the prayer of faith will save the sick. And the Lord will raise him up, and if he has committed sins, he will be forgiven. Confess your trespasses to one another, and pray for one another, that you may be healed. The effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. So this is an admonition for us, and it's something that I find that often individuals, they're either not aware of, or they haven't thought of it in these terms. Sometimes we get the idea this particular service has been perverted a bit in relation to what we might call the last rites. That's a whole thing that's separate and different, and I don't agree with, but with anointing, some people have the idea of last rites, and they're like, oh, has it come to that? They think, well, I'm going to, you have to be on death's door in order to be anointed. No, that's not the case. You don't have to be on death's door in order to be anointed. This is an admonition from God for his children when they're sick to call the elders of the church and to be anointed. So if you haven't, do so. And if you have the book, the Ministry of Healing, then I suggest, and if you don't, I suggest looking it up online or whatever, I suggest reading chapter 16. It's called Prayer for the Sick. Chapter 16, Prayer for the Sick and Ministry of Healing. And I suggest reading through that before you have your anointing service. Now, we need to consider cause and effect. My disease must have a cause. And the cause always comes before the disease. And as long as the disease is present, the cause is still going to be present. If what I do, and what should I say, if the cause is a cause of the mind, right? If it's a cause in the mind and all I do is simply change my lifestyle, or I take medications, or I use herbs or hydrotherapy or surgery or radiation or some other treatment, but I don't remove the cause that is in the mind, then some other manifestation, some other effect is going to come. Your high blood pressure may go away, but then you have a stroke. Your cancer may be removed, but then you develop blood clotting issues. Your thyroid might be irradiated and the thyroid cancer is gone, but now you develop hormonal imbalances and so on, right? So the cause, it's important for us to find the cause and to look for the cause. And again, 9 times out of 10, the cause is going to be found in the mind. And so if that's where it's going to be found, most of the time, the vast majority of the time, that's where you should look. And the cause must be removed. And once the cause is removed, then the effect is going to go away. Again, it may take some time for the effect to go away, but the moment that the cause is removed, the effect will stop progressing, right? It will stop progressing. If you have a significant amount of damage that is already there because of the cause being in a place and the effect coming along, for example, let's say that you have been developing kidney failure over time. And the kidneys have been getting worse and worse and worse, and now you're in stage 4 chronic kidney disease, or stage 3, let's say stage 3 chronic kidney disease. And the cause is identified and the cause is removed. Then you should stop the progress of the kidney failure, but you may not recover back to complete function because you have damaged the kidneys and you have replaced a bit of the normal cells of the kidney with scar tissue. Same thing with liver damage and cirrhosis and so on. A lot of the liver is replaced with scar tissue. And if you've replaced it with scar tissue, from a natural standpoint, you're not getting that back. You can improve the function of the existing cells, but you're not getting back the scar tissue that was there. Now, I say that with a caveat, and that is that God is the healer. And that He's the creator, and He's also the recreator. So you are never in a condition or never in a situation that is too difficult for God that He cannot bring about healing. Okay. So is there hope? Yes, there's always hope. Are you alive? Is God alive? Then there's hope. Right? And your hope and your trust is in Him, but you don't demand that He go and He do things in the way and in the time that you would like it to be done. You trust Him in the process while He is leading in the healing. Right? And in the meantime, yes, I apply lifestyle, I apply natural remedies, I eliminate toxins, and I pray, and I trust God that He is going to work out His healing in my life in His way and in His time. It's His body, it's His problem, and He is the one that can lead in the process of recovery. When I have trust in God in this process, then I'm not the one pushing God to try to get Him to go as fast as I would like Him to go. I'm not the one trusting in the treatments. I'm not the one pushing for the best protocols. I'm not the one always pushing, under pressure, putting others under pressure in order for me to be healthy. And I don't get caught up in just focusing on myself and my recovery process so that I am not involved in taking and giving anymore. I know many of individuals who, when their health has gone downhill, they have become more and more self-focused and less helpful and useful to others. And the law of life just goes in their lives. There's no more taking and giving. They're just trying to take and keep it to themselves. And it doesn't work that way. It will never work that way. If you have a method of healing that does not bring you to taking from God and giving to others, if it does not involve you serving others and being involved with others, then it's not the real deal. It's not the real deal. It's a false method. You and I were created for love. We were created to take love from God, and we were created to give love to others. That's how we were created to be. And God is to be our source, and when He is, we take what is good, we have what is good, and we can give what is good. And that's how He created us to function. When we have others as our source who are not good, there is none who does good, no, not one, then we get what is bad, we have what is bad, and all we can give is what is bad, without a choice. If we don't take anything, we don't have anything to give. And if we take, but we try to keep it to ourselves, that's not going to work either. And we will end up being useless to others. Right? So, what we must do is we must take from God as our source, and we must give to others. And that is God's plan for our lives. And any time that gets interrupted, there are going to be problems. Right? The interruption is a problem in and of itself. Right? The fact that you stop taking from God is a problem. And it will result in other problems, more problems, in the life of the individual. Right? And as we look at it, the tree has many, many, many leaves, too many for us to count. Right? Too many for us to count. But it has fewer branches, but even the branches are too much. And the tree represents our health and the issues. The leaves represent the symptoms. Like the symptoms that we have. There are so many symptoms, and you can't name them all, you can't get your mind around them all. But diseases, oftentimes we name a disease based upon the different symptoms that are associated with that disease. So which leaves are growing off of which branch? And then that will define what disease it is. And there's so many branches that we have a specialist in this part of a tree, and another specialist in that part of the tree, and another specialist in that part of the tree. And so you have all of these specialists because nobody can wrap their mind around all of the branches of all of the trees. And yes, you have a generalist like a family practice doctor or an internist or something like that who goes, okay, well, I think your problem is in this part of the tree, so let's go send you to the specialist who knows more about the branches in this part of the tree. And so that's how our healthcare system functions. It functions up in the branches and the leaves. But when you come down to it, you come down to one trunk. It comes down to one trunk. And really, indeed, in all of us, it comes down to one trunk. And that is the identity, the false identity that I am God. And if I am God, then I am my own. And if I am my own, then I give from myself. But as a creature that has needs, I give from myself in order that I might receive. So my love is for me. It's selfish. It's giving in order to receive. The purpose of my giving is the receiving. And if I am God, then I am dependent upon others. I am a slave to others because I need them to be a specific way. I expect good from them, and when they're not good, I'm frustrated, and I have to try to control them and make them be good. If I am God, I think it's about me. And when things don't go well or they don't treat me well, I take it personally. If I'm a God, I must be worshipped. So others must love me. Others must respect me. They must listen to me and understand me and honor me and so on. And when they don't, oh, wow, I'm the judge and I condemn. I'm also the owner. As a God, I see myself as the owner. And if it's damaged, if it's destroyed, if it's injured, if it dies, if it walks away, then I see it as my loss. And I find things to be my problem, and so I think that I must fix it, I must control it in order to bring it to a successful conclusion. But I can't control all of the factors of the time and the space and circumstances and people and resources and information and so on. And when I fail to control all of these different things, now I have stress. Right? Now I have stress as a result of it. And we know stress is associated with almost every disease, right? And stress comes from believing that I'm a God, attempting to control what is only under God's control, and failing to do so. So, issues of the mind, the identity, the I am God, and sinful nature go behind all of these diseases and all of these conditions, right? Now, the Bible deals with disease in the context of sin, actually. It deals with disease in the context of sin. Exodus 15:26. If you diligently heed the voice of the Lord your God to do what is right, in his sight, to give ear to his commandments and keep all his statutes, I will put none of these diseases upon you which I have brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. Then it shall come to pass, because you listen to these judgments and keep and do them, that the Lord your God will take away from you all sickness, and will afflict you with none of the terrible diseases of Egypt which you have known. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord. Depart from evil. It will be health to your flesh and strength to your bones. My son, give attention to my words. Incline your ear to my sayings. Do not let them depart from your eyes. Keep them in the midst of your heart, for they are life to those who find them, and health to all their flesh. Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. For the hearts of this people have grown dull. Their ears are hard of hearing, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their hearts and turn, so that I should heal them. So here we have read a number of passages, all of them dealing with disease, sickness, or healing, and every factor that is associated with it is a spiritual factor. The Bible treats disease in the terms of sin. Now, when did sin begin? When did disease begin in the first place? Well, it began after the fall of Adam and Eve. It began in the context of sin. If there was no sin, there would be no disease. Right? Now, Jesus deals with disease in the context of sin as well, and he deals with health in the context of faith. Let's see what Jesus says. Jesus turned around, and when he saw her, he said, "Be of good cheer, daughter. Your faith has made you well." And the woman was made well from that hour. Woman who reached out and touched the hem of his garment. She was made well. Why? Because of faith. Mark 10:52. Then Jesus said to him, "Go your way. Your faith has made you well." And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus on the road. Clearly, this was a healing of a blind man. And Jesus said, in relation to his healing, it was because of faith. And here in Luke 17, verse 19, it's a leper. And he says to him, "Arise, go your way, your faith has made you well." This was the one of the 10 lepers that came back to Jesus and thanked him. And Jesus said, "It's your faith that has made you well." Now, where did his faith come from? Well, it came from God. And finally, John 5 and verse 14, afterwards Jesus found him in the temple, this is the man healed by the pool of Bethesda, and said to him, "See, you have been made well. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you." So even Jesus deals with disease in the context of sin and healing in the context of faith. But people say, well, what about the man born blind? What about him? Didn't Jesus say it wasn't because of sin that he was born blind? It wasn't his sin and it wasn't his parents' sin? Well, let's read it. Now Jesus passed by. He saw a man who was blind from birth, and his disciples asked him, saying, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." And then he proved that by bringing light to the man who was blind. Right? So the disciples' question was not so much about sin, it was about blame. Who do we blame? Because the Israelites had the idea of blame. So who was to blame for this man's blindness? Now, it's true that sinful nature or sin is the cause of disease. And sinful nature is involved in this whole process, whether it is in humans or whether it is in angels, right? And so, was the man to blame for his sinful nature? No. Were the parents responsible for their sinful nature? No. So there's no blame to the man, there's no blame to the parents, even though it might be there, it's no blame because there's no responsibility for that. Was there anyone to blame? No, there wasn't. There wasn't. But let's read what inspiration says about this passage. In the question the disciples asked Jesus, they showed that they thought all disease and suffering the result of sin. This is indeed truth, right? So that means that all disease and all suffering is the result of sin. But Jesus showed that it was an error to suppose that everyone who was a great sufferer was also a great sinner. So the degree of the effect is not necessarily to how much of a sinner the individual was. The disciples were not called upon to discuss the question of who had sinned or not sinned, but to understand the power of God, his mercy and compassion in giving sight to the blind. Oh, okay, beautiful. We're also told that there is a divinely appointed connection between sin and disease. No physician can practice for a month without seeing this illustrated. If he will be observing and honest, he cannot help acknowledging that sin and disease bear to each other the relationship of cause and effect. It's there. It's not that it's not there. It is there. Right? It is there. When we separate sin from disease, we separate the gospel from the cure. And that's an important point. When we separate sin from disease, then we separate the gospel from the cure. Now we can just treat disease as a physical problem, a physical malady. We can treat it with physical treatments. We can depend upon physical interventions, and our reliance is upon these physical things, and God is forgotten. And we don't rely upon him. And the glory for the healing and the praise and everything goes to the medication or to the surgeon or to the treatment or to the herb or to the other thing rather than to God, who is the only one that can heal. 2 Chronicles 16:12, and in the 39th year of his reign, Asa became diseased in his feet, and his malady was severe. Yet in his disease he did not seek the Lord, but the physicians. This is written in Scripture as for our admonition. We always go after the physicians. I'm a physician. We do, but God is saying, go after me, go after me. So we have this sinful nature, and when that sinful nature is the foundation of my mind, the operating system that I operate by, when that is the case, then it's going to be associated with taking things personally and giving to receive and manipulation and selfishness, loneliness, bitterness, rejection, control, slavery, loss, and guilt. It's going to come with intemperance and covetousness, fear and anxiety, depression, addictions, infidelity, slander, hatred, gossip, pride, and lust. And that all is going to be associated with disease. And not only is it going to affect us physically and spiritually, but it's going to affect our relationships negatively as well. But when we have the true identity that I'm a child of God, and that is how we operate, the unfallen nature that God created us with, the nature of Christ that we can have access to by faith, and when that is the foundation of the mind and the thinking, then what happens then? Well, now we have no personal hurts. We have companionship and we take to give. We have selflessness and forgiveness and surrender and belonging and freedom and guiltlessness and trust and gain. We have innocent pleasures and encouragement and supportiveness, temperance, faithfulness, acceptance, confidence, generosity, humility, purity, and joy. And all of that is associated with health. And so this brings about the health of the individual. While it also brings about the spiritual health, you get the physical health, and it impacts your relationships and how you relate to others as well. So it does everything. It fixes the spiritual issues, it fixes the physical issues, it fixes the social issues as well of individuals. Yes, sickness of the mind prevails everywhere. 9/10 of the diseases from which men suffer have their foundation here. And what's the solution? Ministry of Healing, page 115, paragraph 2. When the gospel is received in its purity and power, it is a cure for the maladies that originated in sin. When what? When the gospel, when the good news, when the righteousness of Jesus Christ made it possible on our behalf, when the grace of God made available to us by His grace that is accepted by faith, works in me, and I accept it as my own, and the power of God is made available to me, and it transforms my life, and it works in my life. Yes, I'll use all of these different treatment modalities, natural remedies and other things that He has blessed, but I won't trust in those things for my healing because I trust in Him as my healer. And it is the gospel that brings that to me, and it is the gospel that brings healing. And every malady, physical, spiritual, and social, came from sin, and the gospel is the cure.